At the dawn of the motoring century, when most people thought cars were loud, dangerous rich men's toys, a young woman slid behind the wheel of a French built, British sold Napier motor car, and she made history. Her name was Dorothy Levitt.
Gritting gas, you can't tell me I can't. Gritting gas, take your advice and kiss my...
What's up, everyone? I'm Trai, and I'm the host of Grit and Gas Podcast, where we highlight women in motorsports. And today, I'd like to introduce you to Dorothy Levitt. Dorothy was born Elizabeth Dorothy Levi in 1882 in Hackney, London, to her parents Joseph and Julia. Her dad later anglicized their last name from Levi to Levitt. He was a jeweler and a watchmaker, solid, respectable trade in Victorian London, and her mother was a homemaker. She came from a pretty long-standing sort of Liverpool family. They weren't wealthy, but they were comfortable, educated, ambitious, really solidly middle class, the kind of household where refinement, education, self-sufficiency, ambition were expected. She grew up with all of that, and she carried that confidence and drive into adulthood. But even before Dorothy touched a motor car, she had already found her freedom. As a kid, she was all about motion, horses, bicycles, really anything that moved or went fast. In the 1890s, bicycles weren't toys. They were really liberation. They were how people got around. For women, cycling meant no corsets, no chaperones, no limits. Suffragettes called it the machine of freedom, and it gave women control over their own time, their own direction, their own bodies, their own movement, really. This mindset that mobility equals freedom, or mobility equals independence, rather, it shaped Dorothy's life and continued to be a theme for her until the end of her life. She didn't start out thinking about racing. She was chasing a lot of the same things young women across Britain were demanding that time: the right to move freely and decide for themselves about where they wanted to go, who they would go with, and what to do when to get there. As she grew older, she left Hackney for the bright lights of London's West End, where she worked as a typist and quickly moved in more fashionable circles. The West End was where ambition met opportunity and sometimes scandal. Dorothy stood out. She was stylish, independent, and really kind of uninterested in the usual expectations of marriage and quiet respectability. Many young ladies were like this at the time. And the newspapers took notice and hinted that she was what they would call at the time a bachelor girl. In Edwardian England, that phrase carried both curiosity and disapproval. Bachelor girls did such crazy and daring things as living alone, supporting themselves, made their own decisions. They would go out to tea or theater, or the theater without a chaperone. They chose their own friends, and many times they often refused to marry at all. They represented a new kind of woman, a socially daring, financially independent, and really kind of unapologetically modern. It really kind of sound like gals I'd like to hang out with. For Dorothy, that independence wasn't just about society, it became the engine that drove her life. Her entry into motoring came through Selwyn Edge, a director and marketing genius at the Napier Motor Company. Dorothy was hired as his typist, but Edge had just taken a trip to France, and he had seen another driver there and another motor car company doing some publicity stuff with a female driver. And when he got back, and I guess he noticed Dorothy, he just realized she was more interested in combustion than correspondence. He arranged for one of the apprentices by the name of Leslie Callingham to teach her to drive, something that Leslie apparently he accepted reluctantly. He didn't want to do it, but he never forgot. She learned behind the wheel of a 6 horsepower De Dion Bouton. It was one of the early French-built cars Napier serviced and sold in Britain. It had a top speed of about 30 miles per hour and was driven using a hand throttle and a tiller-style steering column. She practiced driving until she mastered it out on the countryside lanes outside of London until she, like I said, mastered it, which was kind of par for the course for her. That's how she seemed to do everything. Soon, she wasn't just his secretary and his typist, but she became one of Napier's official drivers and a public face. Again, remember, Edge was this sort of publicity guy, basically. There were some rumors that they had been romantically involved, although I couldn't find anything concrete on that. From what I get, their partnership was built mainly on speed, publicity, prestige, and staying kind of in the limelight. And, these rumors still kind of hit familiar. Women become successful, they step into spaces that are mostly male dominated, and suddenly the story isn't that she earned it or how she got there. It can become very quickly that she slept her way to the top, or that she only got the job because they wanted a pretty face, or it's just a publicity stunt, and things like that. That was the assumption then, and it still happens now. But Dorothy was actually disciplined and talented and fast as hell. And she would get really frustrated that people would talk about things like who she might have been with and who she was dating, and not so much about what she was doing. Some things, unfortunately, haven't changed as much as we'd like to think. We're still pretty driven about stuff that doesn't really matter. Anyway, while the gossip churned, Dorothy kept doing the one thing that spoke louder than any headline or any gossip column. She raced, and she was winning. Between 1903 and 1908, Dorothy Levitt became one of Britain's most celebrated drivers. She started racing the Napier cars, powerful six-cylinder machines capable of, at the time, pretty astonishing speeds. In 1903, she appeared for the first time at one of the club events in a 6-horsepower Dion Bouton, and the journalists at the time didn't even believe she could start the car, much less race it, much less win it. Running demonstration drives throughout that year, she proved women could handle the controls. 1904, at the Southport Speed Trials, she won her class driving a 12-horsepower Napier that averaged roughly about 36 miles per hour. Later that year, at Blackpool, she repeated that same victory, cementing her reputation as one to watch. 1905 was her breakout season, driving a 100-horsepower Napier K5, a massive green race car built for endurance. She completed the Brighton Speed Trial and won the Daily Mail sweepstakes. She also set the women's land speed record of about 92 miles per hour, which is about 148 kilometers per hour. That same year, she took a smaller horsepower car and went on a 410-mile endurance race from London to Liverpool and back in 2 days. She finished without penalty or without any mechanical failure and earned a national headline nickname of the fastest girl on earth. In 1906, she drove a 50-horsepower Napier at the Shelsley Walsh Hill Climb, setting a new women's record and finishing faster than several of the male rivals at the time. In 1907, at the Hereford 1,000-mile light car trial, she completed every single stage without penalty and was praised by the autocar for her precision and her stamina. Around that same period, her appetite for speed expanded beyond the road. In 1904, she won the championship of the sea and set the women's water speed record at 19.3 miles per hour, piling in a Napier-powered motorboat. This was one of Edge's publicity projects. Newspapers dubbed her a scorcher, which was a term usually reserved for reckless men, but Dorothy wore it as a badge of honor. She was pretty good at hill climbs, too. In the Herkimer Trophy race in Germany, spanning over 1,000 kilometers, she finished fourth overall out of about 172 competitors, and she earned a silver plate for a penalty-free run. Her skill and confidence were really only matched by her sense of showmanship. She often raced with her little black Pomeranian, Dodo, seated in her lap, and as The Guardian put it, her motoring mascot. But for all of her success, Dorothy faced barriers that really didn't have anything to do with speed. In 1905, she was barred from entering the first tourist trophy on the Isle of Man, just because she was a woman. 2 years later, that same circuit that she'd been competing in before, they created new rules that refused her entry entirely. They decided that women wouldn't be allowed to drive, and that stayed that way until 1920. No amount of wins or records could change the rules made by these men who just, I guess, decided she didn't belong. But every barrier she hit really only proved the point she'd be making. It wasn't the machine holding women back. It was the men kind of running the races. Still, she raced where she could and wrote about it when she could not. She became a columnist for The Graphic and lectured on women and motoring. in 1909, she published her book, The Woman and the Car, a chatty little handbook for all women who motor or who want to motor. It was part guide, part manifesto, and really ahead of its time. She wasn't writing about motoring as a novelty. She was teaching women how to own it. The book included everything from how to start a car, how to clean a carburetor, to what to wear, and even what to pack before heading out on the road. She told women to bring a hand mirror to hold up and check the road behind them, making her the first person in print to describe what we now call a rearview mirror. A small revolver for protection, as she said, since women were often alone and stranded cars, like they do now, make tempting targets. A long dust coat and a veil to keep off wind and grime because they weren't enclosed cars like that yet. Wash leather gloves to save their hands from blisters, and spare fuses, a spanner, wrench, and a screwdriver because she wrote, and I quote, "Every woman should be able to attend to her own car." I can't. And of course, a box of chocolate because long journeys are better, with something sweet. It was really kind of a perfect picture of who she was, part Edwardian lady, part socialite, part engineer, and just really unique. She taught women that confidence came from competence. And to her, the ability to drive and to fix what breaks wasn't just mechanical skill, it's a statement. You don't really have to wait for anybody to rescue you, and you don't need anybody to take you where you want to go. Dorothy's own words from The Woman in the Car really show just how forward thinking she was for the time. She wrote, "The car has come to stay, and the woman who can drive it will be among the most independent of her sex." She warned new drivers not to be nervous. "Always appear perfectly calm," she says. "Remember that nerves are contagious." That's a direct quote. She also emphasized skill over style. And she said, "A woman who can manage a motor car can manage anything." End quotes. You imagine reading that in 1909 when most women still needed permission to open a bank account. But she wasn't just teaching driving. She was redefining what independence looked like. Again, that idea that movement means independence. When Napier shut down its racing program in 1908, Dorothy's career stalled. Her relationship with Selwyn Edge also seems to have stopped at that time. He kind of disappears from the book entirely, though, oddly, his estranged wife was mentioned as a distinguished motorist. In 1909, Dorothy turned her attention to skyward to study aviation, and though I looked, I couldn't find any record that confirmed she ever earned one. By 1912, her columns ended and she vanishes from public life. In 1922, at 39 years old, she died from morphine poisoning with heart disease and measles cited as contributing factors. She was buried in the Meadowview Jewish Cemetery in Brighton. The press really couldn't get enough of her. Some of them adored her. The Illustrating Sporting and Dramatic News called her, quote, a fearless sportswoman of rare charm. Others mocked her, calling her reckless or unwomanly. Dorothy used that double-edged fame to her own advantage. She was really good at staying in the limelight. Both her and Selwyn were really, really good at playing into those headlines, posing for photographs in gloves and heels besides mud-splattered race cars. They knew that attention sold papers and bought sponsors. The irony is that the very press that tried to belittle her ended up kind of immortalizing her instead. Dorothy's short, dazzling career, really, and the mystery that followed helped kind of blur the lines between fact and legend. In later decades, writers and journalists sometimes would merge her with early female racers, creating kind of this mythic first woman driver. One woman she was often confused with was, I'm going to butcher the name, Baroness Helene van Zuylen de Rothschild? I have a pronunciation here. It says she raced, anyway, under the pseudonym of Lesnell for Pinar Levansor, which was a few years before Dorothy. And I believe that is the woman that Edge saw when he went to France and then brought that idea home and taught Dorothy how to drive. Both of these women moved in elite motoring circles and drove these powerful machines that made headlines. Another woman's name is Camille Dugast. She was a French balloonist, a racer, and she competed in events like the 1903 Paris-Madrid run. She was also a musician, a diver, an animal welfare advocate. Then there was another one whose name would get mixed up because of the name. Her name was Levitt, Levitt, Levett. She was another English hill climb driver, active kind of around the same time. Programs would list her as Mrs. L or Miss L, and because of the spelling and the popularity at the time, she often got credit for Miss Levett's finishes. Another one was Eleanor Velasco Thornton, the secretary and muse who inspired the Rolls-Royce Spirit of Ecstasy ornament, and I think also some of the rumors about relationships that came up from what I was finding, the sort of the mixed information online. Decades later, another woman entered the myth chain, Violet Morris. She was a French athlete and racer from the 20s and 30s, really known for her defiance of gender roles and her eventual infamy in World War II. We will be covering her. These mix-ups really tell us something about that era, that the world really wasn't simply ready or used to seeing women behind the wheel and competing like this. To journalists, there really could be only one lady driver. So a lot of them merged them together into one single story or mythos. But Dorothy Levitt was real, unique, and kind of unstoppable. She was this, typist from Hackney who raced 100 horsepower cars when women barely even were allowed to ride bicycles by themselves. And her spirit echoes today in every woman who lines up on the starting grid, straps up in a rally car, throws a leg over a motorcycle. You can trace a straight line from Dorothy's dust-covered Napier to women like Michelle Mouton in rally, Danica Patrick in IndyCar, and Anna Carrasco in Moto3. More than a century later, we're still proving what Dorothy already knew, that machines don't care about gender and that freedom belongs to anybody brave enough and skilled enough to get behind the wheel and make history. I'm Trai, and this has been Grit and Gas. Stay tuned for next time where we cover another woman in motorsports.
I see the choices laid out for me. They're not easy and they're never